Well, hello, and good morning, everyone. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Carson, and I'm a communications coordinator here at Great Lakes Church. But it's kind of obvious that there's someone else with me this morning. How are you? Who are you?
I'm good, Carson. I'm Andrew Gavin, I think, this morning, and thanks for giving me an excuse to get to church on time.
Yes,
This has been a really big moment in my life.
Dude, you were crushing it. You were like a whole 15 minutes early, even. So
yeah, miracles do happen.
Amen. Don't try and tell me they don't. Andrew, tell me one fun fact about you. One thing that you would like the people at home to know this morning.
We bought a van this week. That's like a big moment in our
That's like an
life.
adult win.
Yeah, 3 kids. We went into the minivan territory. Like, this has been a monumental week for the Gavin family.
When did you trade in your sedan for a minivan? And at that point, did you feel like you surrendered something, you know?
Ashley definitely feels like she surrendered something, yes. But
Yeah.
she did say, and I quote, if I'm going to drive a minivan, it better be legit. So we feel like we got a legit minivan
Yeah.
in the parking lot this morning.
It's all black everything, right?
All black everything.
That's
it is.
huge. That's all you need. Well, man, it is so good to have you. We're hanging out with the folks at home today. So whether you are watching on Facebook, YouTube, Church Online, it is so good to have you. And we actually see some of you in the chat already this morning. We see on Church Online, we have Michelle, Patty, Liam, and Sue. And then on Facebook, we have Jeanette and Richard. So if you guys are hanging out at home, we're just excited that you're here. And if you haven't dropped a comment yet to let us know you're hanging out with us, do that, because we want to shout you out this morning. Tell us where you're watching from, and I don't know, maybe what your favorite fall drink is.
Thank you.
Favorite fall drink, like an apple cider?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like a pumpkin spice latte?
Yeah, I just drink coffee every day, but like straight regular coffee.
Yeah, so you have no personality.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you already knew that. The coffee wasn't the thing that told you that.
No, obviously you do a lot of things, and we've had the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit. And part of the reason I invited you on is because I think you're kind of funny sometimes, and you're a charming personality. So tell me a little bit about what do you do outside of Great Lakes Church? Like, you attend here on Sundays, but what else do you do?
Yeah, well, I'm in my professional life the director of athletics at UW Parkside, so that's really what brought us to this community just over 3 years ago.
Okay.
And dad of 3, as I mentioned, and Ashley's here on staff now, so we kind of started coming and obviously got into volunteering, especially through Ashley, and then you guys roped her into the staff, and it's great. This has been an unbelievable community for us. So
That's awesome
to have here in Kenosha.
What would you say your favorite thing has been about being a part? Like, what really stands out for you about Great Lakes Church?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in terms of the people, that's been a big part. I mean, I think the lobby atmosphere, honestly, is what drew us. Like, okay, this is going to be our church community.
Yeah.
It just kind of started in the lobby, and as much of a hard time as I give him, it started with Justin, his ability to welcome people and make us feel like we were wanted here and welcomed here right away.
Yeah.
But really that led to a small group, and that's become our friendship community here in the area.
Yeah.
And then for me, like, being able to be here on Sunday mornings, like have the kids back in the kids ministry, and have a little time to reflect on the week and kind of reset myself has been really important as well. Obviously.
Yeah, man. No, it's awesome, and I love that. I think the thing that we love about Great Lakes Church, like, it's different for everyone. Oh, wow.
And Dave. I love Dave.
Yeah, Dave's the best. Dave's our favorite, but it is so fun. He's the kind of guy who just floats around the lobby, and he pokes his head in about every week now.
I saw him poking in last week, and I was like, okay, now I know what to expect next week. So.
Catches you off guard still, but not as much.
Right.
No, that's awesome. We want to say hello to a few other friends this morning. Wow, a lot of you have populated the comments. Monique, Sandy, Joan, Carla, Wayne, Fran, Dev. Wow, you are just showing up and showing off, y'all at home. And Denise, you are at Church Online, and even a few on YouTube this morning, Betty and Lynn. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us. It is a joy to have you. If you have any questions for Andrew, we do have him on a hot seat right now, so feel free to send those in too. But Andrew, you talked about how plugged in you are here at Great Lakes Church. How did you first get plugged in?
Yeah, well, like most things in our family, it started with my wife. So we got a mailer.
God bless.
Honestly, we had been here we'd probably been in the community about 6 months, and we had tried a couple of churches, and we loved our church community in Kentucky where we moved from.
Yeah.
And just hadn't really found that right fit. So the mailer is really what brought us to the front door.
Sure.
And I talked about kind of what drew us here. And then, you know, the connection card, my wife, of course, filled it out.
Oh, of course.
You know, told a little bit about us, said she was wanted to volunteer with kids ministry. So
oh my gosh.
she started her volunteer work here with the babies, which doesn't shock anyone who knows her. Even though we had babies at the time at home and now have another baby.
Yes.
Her Sunday morning was like, I need more babies. So she volunteered back there, and then
that's
it's
awesome.
obviously grown from there.
Yeah. No, it's really actually convenient that you talk about the connection card. It's almost like we planned that. What? No, so the connection card is a great way for those of you hanging out at home this morning even to get plugged in here at Great Lakes. Regardless of where you're at, we know everyone's at a different comfort level in the midst of this pandemic. We know some of you might just be out of town this week, and maybe you have questions, maybe you want to get plugged in, maybe you just want to be clued in on the weekly email. Whatever it is, you can go to greatlakeschurch.com/cc. Again, that's greatlakeschurch.com/cc, and you can fill out the connection card there, and that's a great first step. And I think you're a living testament of that, right?
I think so, yeah. And I started getting the weekly email only a couple weeks ago. And let me tell you, he didn't tell me to say this. Great job. You do a great job with that. It is very informative. So sign up for the weekly email.
Be careful. There might not be enough space in this room for my ego and for you. So
that's a good point.
You got to be careful feeding me those
Justin's
compliments.
Not here, so.
Yeah, as long as we can still throw Justin under the bus. If you're watching this morning, Justin, we love you. So grateful for you. But
that sounded sincere.
It was. I know. I did mean it, though. Justin's a homie. He knows that.
Of course.
So we have Thea and Dale. We have Debbie and Sarah this morning. Lisa Matthews. Oh, so Justin is watching. Lisa, give Justin our regards. And we are just getting ready to move into a video, actually, that talks about baptism this week. So if you don't know what baptism is, that's cool. This video is for you. If you've been thinking about getting baptized, that's cool because we have an opportunity coming up, and this video is going to give you some info on that. Wherever you fall in the spectrum, we just want to show you this high energy. It's about 2 minutes, but we're going to swap over to this video real quick. So we will see you back here in just a bit. Check this out.
Water. It's kind of a big deal. Drink it, lounge in it, skate on its frozen brother. See, there are copious references to water in pop culture. Kanye has a song about it. It's where a monstrous shark resides in Jaws. It's the place our homeboy SpongeBob calls home. But maybe you're not a Kanye or SpongeBob fan, and for that, we don't blame you. See, the Bible has a lot of references to water too. Written over 1,500 years by dozens of contributing authors, there's no shortage of stories that blow us away. There's a massive flood recorded in Genesis 6. Jesus walks on water, and then he turns water into wine. He talks about this thing called baptism. In fact, Jesus himself gets baptized. And I've always wondered, why did Jesus actually get baptized rather than just talking about it? After all, if anyone were exempt from this process, it seems like it should be Jesus. 33 years lived in complete perfection, and yet it didn't matter what his track record was. He knew his closeness with God wasn't dependent on having all the right answers or touting a flawless report card. See, this whole Jesus following thing means that we get to drop the act altogether. We choose to get baptized because we're all in on this journey of following Jesus. We know we're on the right track when we look more like Jesus today than we did last week, last month, or last year. Simply put, being baptized is just an outward expression of an inward change. It's our way of showing the world that we're tired of being the same as we used to be, and that we're ready to be made new. So I wonder if we could all take to heart the words of Paul. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, and the new is here.
shot, no new. All right. The big finale. And here we go. So, wherever you fall on the spectrum, whether you are ready to get baptized or maybe it's something that you just heard about for the first time, it's a representation of life change. It shows that we're different today than we were a year ago. And maybe you're considering taking that next step in your relationship with Jesus. And if you are, you can go to greatlakeschurch.com/baptism. We invite you to head there to find out more about the process, to answer any questions that you have, and maybe even to sign up for our services on Wednesday, November 4th here in Kenosha, or Sunday, November 8th in Kenosha and Racine. And life change is what we're all about here at Great Lakes Church, is being people who help people find and follow Jesus. And one of the ways that we're equipped to do that is through your generosity. And so if you've been consistently giving, if you have given it all in the course of your time here, we are so grateful for you. And if you've never given before, we invite you to take the first step today. If you've called Great Lakes Church your home for a while, you can do so just by heading to greatlakeschurch.com/impact. That link will populate in the chat in just a few moments. But wherever you are on the spectrum, thanks so much for hanging out with us this morning.
All right, Carson, we're welcoming back Pastor Dave for week 3 of the series titled For. This week, he's talking about For Hope, which we all need a little bit of right now, I think. So thanks for inviting me, and it was fun this morning.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out. Enjoy the talk, you guys. See ya.
Hello. It is good to see you. Every week, we start the exact same way when we get into our talk. We want to welcome all of you who are at our different campuses. Kenosha campus, hello to you. Racine campus, we welcome you. To our groups now that watch online via Zoom in order to discuss the talk right after the service, we welcome you. And we also welcome our official online campus. Week after week after week, you join us and you're faithful, and we say hello. And then I want to welcome the people in the room with me. Wow. Guys, it is good to see everybody. It is a great day to be here if you're just joining us, because we are in week 3 of a series that we're simply calling For, right? And the heart behind this series is that as individuals and collectively as a church, it ought to be our goal. It ought to be a drive in our life. It ought to be our life ambition to be known by what we are for rather than by what we are against. So here's the deal. Anytime that you read the news on some app, right? Or anytime that you maybe watch a video of things unfolding in our world, it just seems like the same stories are on replay, right? They just keep getting repeated over and over and over again. People are getting sick. People are tragically dying. Jobs are vanishing. The economy's struggling. You know that our nation is divided. In fact, literally as I was leaving for service today, I got another, because I get these like every day, another political ad, little flyer in the mail. They want to take over America. They want abortion until birth, and they want you to pay for it. We must stop them. Them, right? Like there is this vicious, and I know tomorrow I'm going to get one that's anti-Trump. And it just seems like the most pervasive message in our world today is that we are about to experience the end of the world as we know it. And it's so easy to get sucked into the negativity and into the fear and into the anxiety. And I just got to tell you, on a personal level, I do feel like I am living on some emotional edge all the time. This social distancing is probably a good thing, because, man, I feel like if you look at me wrong right now, I just want to say something, right? And there's something going on, and yet I know at the core of my being, I don't want to live like that. I want to be a person of hope. So this past week, I was reading about a town I'd never heard of before, Flagstaff, Maine. And for more than 100 years, Flagstaff was a thriving community. People lived there. People raised families there. People sent their kids to school. People had church families that they were a part of. It was a very active community. But in 1949, things changed because they were going to construct a dam in the area. And basically what happened is hundreds of individuals and families were forced to sell their homes and their businesses to a power company that was going to eventually flood the town so it could become a part of a large lake for which the dam was being built. Now, just think about this for a moment. In the months leading up to this town becoming flooded, and everybody knows it's happening, what happens is the town pretty much comes to a halt in regards to improvements. Nobody's doing anything to their home, right? Nobody's putting an addition on their house. Nobody's remodeling their kitchen. Nobody's painting their bathroom because everybody knows that in a couple of months, it's just going to be covered with water. And that's exactly what happened. The town ended up becoming flooded. And so if you visit right now, today, the town of Flagstaff, Maine, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see a lake. The entire town gone, wiped out. And as I was reading this story, I couldn't help but think there's absolutely no reason to try to improve anything in the present if you don't have hope of a better future. So if you're convinced that your life is never going to get better, if you're convinced that your marriage is never going to improve, that your relationship with a son or with a daughter is never going to move anywhere, that your career, you're never going to be able to take steps forwards financially, you're never going to be any better off than you are right now, then come on, let's just be honest. Why even try? And so in this series, as we talk about what we want to be known for, one of the things that I personally want to be known for, and I'm really hoping that collectively as a church, we begin to develop a reputation for, is I want to be known for hope. I want to be known as someone who brings hope into every situation and in every environment that I walk into, because hope is the anticipation of good. Hope is this conviction that regardless of what our present circumstances look like, the future will in some meaningful way be better than the present. Not necessarily easier than the present, not necessarily more fun than the present, but in some meaningful way, it's going to be better than the present. Of course, when we talk about hope, it can be a little confusing because there's different types of hope. So let's just walk through them. One of the ways that we talk about hope is when we talk about it in a wishful way, right? Wishful hope. So when you're late to a meeting and you're like, I really hope I get green lights all the way to this meeting and I don't have to navigate any traffic, and you're just hoping against hope that it's going to be an easy drive, that is wishful hope. It's out of your control. When you buy a lottery ticket, and you're really excited because this could change your life forever, that is wishful hope. The reality is you have a better chance, true story, of becoming president of the United States than you do of winning a big lottery. You have a better chance of a vending machine falling over on you and killing you than winning a big lottery. Just think about that, right? You have a better chance of being declared a saint by the Catholic Church than winning a big lottery. We ain't ever going to call you a saint because we know you too much, right? But wishful hope is hoping for something that just very likely isn't going to happen. And if it does happen, it was just by random chance. It was by luck. That's one type of hope. Another type of hope is expectant hope. So if I go out and I plant tomato seeds in a garden and I say, I really hope they sprout, that's expectant hope. It's not rooted in just wishes and wish, it's not rooted in luck because I actually did something. I have a reason to believe they're going to sprout. Now, just because I did something doesn't mean they're going to sprout. Weather affects whether or not if animals get into the seeds, right, that can affect it. But there's a reason that I'm expecting. And so when I say, well, I expect them to sprout or I hope they sprout, that's expectant type of hope. But then there's a third type of hope. And this is the type of hope I want to zero in on today. It's a certain type of hope. This is a confident type of hope. This is based on what I know about this person. I can say I'm very hopeful that this is going to be the results. So when you're asked to give a reference for somebody and you like this person and you've worked with them and you're actually excited to be a reference for them, that's a confident type of hope because you know the person. A couple thousand years ago, the author of Hebrews was reflecting on the character and on the faithfulness of God and was writing about how we can have confidence in God. And here's what the author of Hebrews writes. They say, this hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. The character of God, the faithfulness of God, this hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. And so when the tidal waves of life hit us financially, when the tidal waves of life hit us emotionally, when the tidal waves of life hit us morally, when they hit us mentally, we need an anchor in our life. Because an anchor is going to keep us from drifting, and what an anchor is going to do is provide stability in the midst of the storm. So just think about this, man. Think about what we attach our lives to, right? If my life is attached to money, and that's like the big thing that really grounds me and keeps me mentally sane, right? If my life is maybe anchored to a presidential candidate and whether or not they get elected, right? If my life is anchored to a relationship or it's anchored to what somebody thinks about me, the reality is that's a pretty small anchor. That's not going to hold up in a big storm. My life's just going to be moving all the time. So this last week, in getting ready for this talk, I was doing just some quick research on anchors and found out that the oldest anchors in the world were just rocks. In fact, here's a picture of an Egyptian stone anchor. This is a legit, it kind of looks fake, but it's a real anchor from 3,500 years ago. Right? And what ancient civilizations would do is they would drill these holes in these rocks, and then they put chains around them, a rope around them, and that's what they would use. And some of the anchors were literally entire baskets filled with stones. But of course, the anchors we're most familiar with are the ones with hooks on them, right? And so, for the most part, they're going to be a little bit better than other types of anchors because they can latch onto something. So I brought my kayak anchor. All right, when I go kayaking, I know it sounds ridiculous that I would have an anchor, but sometimes I go out into a lake, and what I'll do is, if it's really windy and I don't want to be constantly, rowing, I'll just throw this down. If I don't want to get into paddling, it's just like, dude, I'll throw this down, and it will catch onto something, and then it don't move. And it works for my kayak. But if I'm the captain of a massive ship, right, if I'm like in charge of an oil tanker, my kayak anchor isn't going to help. You throw this on an oil rig, man, guess what? You're not even going to know it's on there. It's not even going to matter. And so at that point, I'm going to need something much, much bigger. The bigger the ship, the bigger the anchor. And the reason I bring this up is I want you to know in no uncertain terms, your life is a big ship. Your life matters. It's not insignificant. It's not meaningless. You need a big anchor, and I need a big anchor for my life. Because if we drift too far, and if our life becomes too unstable, it's going to impact a whole lot of people. It's not just going to impact us as individuals. And so when it comes to the faithfulness of God and when it comes to the character of God, I'm going to read it again. This hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. And the reason that the faithfulness of God and the character of God is an anchor for our souls is because regardless of what we're going through, and regardless of what we're experiencing or the season our life is in, God has promised that he is going to be with us in the midst of it. In fact, one of the most repeated phrases in all of the ancient scriptures, God speaks it regularly to individuals, and on other occasions, he speaks it to entire groups of people, is this phrase, I will be with you. So when Joshua replaces Moses as the leader of the Jewish people, it was a big moment. He's intimidated, he's afraid. God speaks very clearly, and he says to Joshua, I will be with you. When the Jewish people are terrified of their fate as a nation because of some powerful empires that are just taking over incredible amounts of territory, on several different occasions, God says to the Jewish people, I will be with you. Some of the final words that Jesus spoke to his closest followers were, be sure of this, I will be with you. And so regardless of what your present circumstances look like, I want you to know that God is with you and God is for you. In every situation, in every circumstance, in every season, you and I can be hopeful. Why? Because we can be confident that God is with us. We can be hopeful that the future will in some meaningful way be better than the present because God is with us and God is for us. Now, to be clear, let's just all get on the same page here. Hope is not the same as optimism. Right? Optimism is this tendency to believe that everything is just going to turn out happily ever after. That's optimism. Optimism is little orphan Annie singing, the sun will come out I'm not going to sing it. Tomorrow, right? Come on, that's a great song, but the sun doesn't always come out tomorrow. And if you're an optimist, I just got to say this. That's awesome. We need optimists in our world. We need people who look at a situation and say, man, phew, that's a bad situation, but it's not as bad as you think it is. Let me tell you why. Right? We love optimists. They're fun to be around. But being an optimist is very different than being than being a person of just hope. Now, you can be optimistic and hopeful. You can be the same. But hope and optimism are not the same thing, right? Optimism is looking, like I said, at a bad situation and saying, whoo, it's not as bad as you think. Hope is different. Hope looks at a bad situation and say, whoo, it is bad. In fact, it is really bad. In fact, I didn't realize it was this bad. But I still believe in a better future. That's hope. Hope says, man, I'm looking at my life, and based on decisions people have made or based on my own decisions, my life has fallen apart. My life is broken into pieces, but I still believe God can take the broken pieces of my life and make something beautiful from it. Hope is, I look at my life and it feels like I've just done some stupid things and it's burned down to ashes, years and years of what I've been trying to build, this family, this relationship with my son or daughter, these friendships. It just feels like it's been burned down in a moment, but I believe that God can bring beauty out of ashes. That's hope. One example of this is just the Apostle Paul. Because if you know anything about the Apostle Paul, man, he's known for his faith, he's known for his teachings and his writings, but he's also known because he was a person who went through a lot of difficulty and a lot of suffering. He was imprisoned on several occasions. He was shipwrecked 3 different times. He was betrayed by people that he thought was his friends. He was in constant danger everywhere he went. On one occasion, he was actually stoned, not recreationally like you might think, but he was actually pelted with stones, right? Just clarity there. He was beaten on 8 different occasions that we know about. But because he anchored his life to the faithfulness of God and to the character of God, he was still hopeful. He didn't just throw in the towel. In fact, he writes about this to a group of followers of Jesus living in Rome. Here's what he writes. He says, and we know that God causes everything. He causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. He doesn't say that everything is good, but he says God can cause everything to work together for good. So don't miss this. The difficulty that you go through in your life, the challenges you go through in your life, the pain you go through, the hurts you go through, the betrayal that you experience, the things that you wish you could go back and undo, the words that someone spoke to you that you wish were never spoken to you. God can use all of that for good. And that is why over and over and over in the ancient scriptures, he is referred to as the God of hope. Now just think about this. Right? In all of ancient Rome and all of ancient Greece, there were just endless amounts of gods and goddesses. Some were more famous than others, but just gods and goddesses everywhere. There was Zeus, the god of sky and thunder. There was Ares, the god of war. There was Athena, the goddess of war. There was Poseidon, the god of the sea. There was Apollo, the god of healing and sun and light. And not a single one of them ever referred to as the God of hope. But when the Apostle Paul writes to followers of Jesus living in Rome, and he writes about God, the creator of everything we see, the creator of this world, here's what he writes. He says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Paul says, I pray that the God of hope will fill you with joy and peace. So as you look to God, and as you depend on God, and as you remember God, and as you thank God, and as you serve God, and as you think about God, and as you study God, and you do what you can to revolve your life around God, my prayer is that you experience peace and you experience joy. And even more than that, my prayer is that you would overflow with hope everywhere you go. See, this is the power of hope. If I truly carry hope and I am a person of hope, I bring it into every environment I walk into. It's like I'm a thermostat, right? I just walk in and the temperature starts to rise. There's something about hope that's powerful. Hope is contagious. Now, when I wrote the words, hope is contagious this week, I thought this ought to be easy for us to remember because we are in the midst of a pandemic. And over the past several months, we've become increasingly aware of how easy it is for germs and viruses to spread. right? So we do our best and we social distance and we wear masks and we wash our hands more than we were before. And when we interact with people, sometimes there's plexiglass in between us. And here's the thing, we all know that, it's important to try to stay healthy. Now, I know some people would argue it's been blown out of proportion, but nobody's going to argue that COVID-19 is real. And we know it's real, right? And it's contagious. And the same is true with hope. Hope is contagious. This past week, I watched a TED Talk from a big nerd researcher named Nicholas Christakis, right? Social scientist at Yale University. He's smarter than like most of us combined. And he's done a lot of research on social networks. It was just fascinating. So I read some of his stuff, but then I watched a couple of his TED Talks that are out there. And I thought, man, this is just a fascinating thing because the bottom line is this, we all have social networks, right? We all have family and friends and coworkers and acquaintances that we're interacting with on a regular basis. And our social networks are impacting us, right? And they are affecting us probably even more than we think. Because most of us would say, well, I get it. I'm going to be impacted by the people around me. No, but it really does. Our social networks impact us more than we think. And just giving you some examples, if your social network is pretty much people, like a large percentage of them are people who eat healthy and they exercise regularly. Even if you're like, I hate that stuff, right? Over time, you start to eat more healthy. And the same is true if they're unhealthy, right? You just start eating more junk food when that's primarily the people in your social network. If you're someone who just doesn't like to study, and then all of a sudden your roommate in college is like crazy studious, and they're always studying, you tend to become more studious. It's just natural because the people around you are like that. If you've never cared about your lawn, and then you have somebody move in next door and they're like meticulous about their lawn and they've got a garden and they're taking it, just naturally over time, you start to care a little bit more about your lawn. And it can even go to trivial stuff, right? Somebody smiles at you, you smile back. And some of you don't, but most people, you just kind of you just smile back. It's just, we have influence on each other. And so we've got these social networks, our family, our friends, our co-workers, our neighbors, our acquaintances. And we know, we know this, that they do impact us. But here's what I want you to think about. That everybody in our social network has another social network outside of them. And this is what this guy was talking about. This is fascinating to me, right? So let me talk for a moment about my friend Steve. Steve is a real individual. Steve attends Great Lakes Church. I hang out with him on a regular basis, sometimes a couple times a week. He's not totally right in the head, but he's fun to hang out with. And pretty much crazy, right? Pretty much crazy. So here's the thing about Steve. I know when I get around Steve that he's going to impact me or influence me at some level. And the same is going to happen when I'm around him, right? I influence him. So we talk about church, we talk about politics, we get in these discussions. We're naturally influencing each other. But what I don't think about is that Steve actually has a friends outside of me. He's got family outside of me. He's got neighbors outside of me, right? So Steve's friend, and we could have even put friends, are impacting Steve, who just naturally, because of our friendship, is impacting me. Now it goes a little step further. Steve's friends all of a sudden have friends of their own. And so Steve's friend has friends. And this social network that his friends' friends have are impacting his friend, which is impacting Steve, which is impacting me. And what this really big nerd was talking about, because I forget his name, what he was talking about is how we are always careful to say, be careful the friends you choose. Well, it's so much bigger than that because our friends' friends are all impacting us without us even realizing it because of the networks that we have. And every single one of us, at some point, if we just think about it, our lives are mosaics of those who've raised us, of those who've spoken to us and taught us and interacted with us. So here's a picture of my wife and I and just a bunch of pictures of friends and family and different events we've been to that have made this up. And some of the people at Great Lakes Church are in this mosaic, right? My friends are in this mosaic. My kids are in this mosaic. And the reason I bring this up is I want you to know everywhere you go and everywhere I go, we are adding to the mosaic of someone's life. And we can add positivity or we can add negativity. We can add despair or we can add hope. We can put something good into that mosaic or we can put something bad. And whatever we choose to do, it's contagious. I mean, it's so hard to comprehend that, like, man, the way I speak to somebody can absolutely impact them in a negative way. And then they, in their social network, maybe because they're having a bad day now, maybe it affects them in a negative way. And then they say something, and then they say something. There's this ripple effect that takes place. And I was reminded this past week in a positive way. I was reading a story about a mom in Ohio. She was having a really bad day, and her kids were fighting about what to have for dinner or whatever, and she just decides, okay, I'm bringing them to McDonald's. She gets to McDonald's, she orders, and then when she goes to pay, realizes she left her purse at home. And so she just says to the 16-year-old kid who's working there, just cancel my order. I forgot my purse, And the 16-year-old, without missing a beat, pulls out his own card, puts it in, and says, I got it. And she said, no, I don't want you to pay for my meal and for my kids, just please. And he says, no, seriously, it's my pleasure. I want to do this for you. Well, this mom goes from having a bad day to now all of a sudden having a good day. Goes home, writes about it on Facebook with the goal of trying to connect with this guy's mom to be able to say to his mom, hey, your kid's amazing. He paid for us. What a blessing it was in our life. Well, as she posts on Facebook, she learns through just the interactions that are happening that this kid, the reason he works at McDonald's is because he's trying to earn money for a car. And because he's been a blessing to her, now she wants to be a blessing to him. So she creates a GoFundMe page to raise enough money to hopefully buy a kid a car. Her goal was like $5,000, and in 1 week, she raised almost $50,000. Guys, again, it's just this whole thing. Hope is contagious. And so we ought to do everything we can to raise the level of hope in our life. And I will pay for your McDonald's meal any day of the week. Now, guys, here's the deal. If we're going to raise the level of hope in our life so it can overflow everywhere we go, there's lots of ways we can do it, right? We can certainly find ways to refuel ourselves. We can be selective with the people we hang out with. We can choose to be dreamers, and we can do our best to think big. We can discover our strengths, and we can use our strengths as much as we can. We can maybe get outdoors if that refuels. There's so many ways that we can raise the level of hope. But I want to talk about two specific ways, because I think these are the biggest ways. I think these are the ways, at least personally for me, these are the things that do more for me than anything else. And the reason this is so important is because when we are drained mentally and we are drained emotionally and we are drained physically, we do not think rationally. We don't feel hopeful about anything. I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to prolong it because I do not want to focus on these seasons. But there's been 3 or 4 seasons in the history of Great Lakes Church. We're 11 and a half years old. There have been 3 or 4 seasons in the history of this church where I was absolutely convinced we would not make it. Absolutely believed we were going to have to shut our doors. The biggest of those seasons was 2017 when our Kenosha campus ended up moving 6 times in a year. Our Racine campus, we lost key leadership there. It was a devastating time. Did not think we were going to make it. But I promise you, if you sat down and you looked at the situation and you looked at the amount of people who are showing up and you looked at where our consistent, faithful giving was at and you looked at kind of the assets of the church and you looked at the ministry that was happening in the community and you looked at the excitement about getting involved from people and serving, you would have said, Dave, you're crazy. What are you seeing that we're not seeing? And the reason I tell you that is some of my closest friends and mentors and advisors did that to me. Like you talk about this thing like it's going to fold tomorrow. What are you talking about? You've got a church of people filled, still ready to do mission work, still ready. But because I was so tired and so exhausted, I did not see it. That's why it's important to keep ourselves hopeful. King David at a low season in his life says, I had to learn to encourage myself in the Lord. So let me tell you 2 ways that we can do it. Number 1 is I personally need to feed my mind with positivity over and over and over because what controls my mind controls my life. What I think about, I eventually become. All of us are constantly moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. And this is why we have to limit the amount of news that we digest. It is the reason why we have to limit the time we spend on social media. Period. If you've not seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, you need to see it. Because what The Social Dilemma shows is that what shows up in our social media accounts is not an accident. So we just think everything's random in life. And I'm telling you, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I promise you this, I'm not some weird guy up here who's like, hey, the end of the world's gonna come, and let me give you some weird numbers, and let me, no. I'm just telling you, the news that goes into our mind and into our hearts and the stuff on our social media feeds, it is not as random as we think. Even the influences of our friends, not as random as you think, because the friends that are influenced us are influenced by their social networks, who are influenced by their social networks. So, one of the most powerful things we can do to stay hopeful and to raise our level of hope is to feed our minds with positivity. Number two, we need to learn how to focus on a better future. To just in our minds and in our hearts say, I believe that better days are yet to come. If there is a broken relationship with one of your kids, if you're in the midst of a marriage that is struggling, if your financial situation is a mess, if you're struggling in your mental health or your emotional health, you can throw in the towel or you can focus on a better future. And right now, in this current season, I have been doing a great job. I haven't always done that. I told you there have been 4 or 5 seasons, but I've been doing a great job of doing that in regards to Great Lakes Church, because with COVID-19 and 25, 30% of our church showing up regularly in person and trying to figure out how we're going to stay engaged, keep people engaged online and trying to just stay ahead of the game financially, right? When we're trying to figure out where do we make cuts or whatever. I'm going to tell you, this is the stuff that has gotten me so down in the past, but I just keep reminding myself, man, as I look at the past faithfulness of God, it's building my faith for the future. It doesn't mean that every day is good and every day I wake up and say, oh, I can't wait to keep rebuilding this thing. I can't wait to keep relaunching it. No, but there's something I've just kind of convinced myself of, like, God, you've proven yourself over and over and over to be faithful. In a letter he writes to followers of Jesus in Rome, the Apostle Paul, he talks personally about the difficulties in his life, and he talks about the sufferings that we go through. And we're not going to read it, but it's in Romans chapter 8, and Paul says to his readers that eventually the difficult things that we're going through and the suffering that we're experiencing, he says, eventually it's going to get better. And it's not that great because he does acknowledge that it may not get better on this side of heaven. Yeah, we all want it to get better on this side, but he acknowledges that. But he compares the sufferings that we're going through on this planet to childbirth. And he says, the suffering of life is like the pains of childbirth. Now, a long time ago, maybe a couple years ago, I read, and I don't want to get into debate on this, but I read that the two most painful things that an average person can experience on this planet is childbirth and a kidney stone. All right, childbirth and a kidney stone. Again, I'm not going to debate it, ladies. I'm going to trust what you have to say. I have had a kidney stone, so I'll leave it there. But on a purely physical level, those are the two most extraordinary, painful things we can go through, okay? But here's what's crazy. It is possible after giving birth, even if there was no medication or anything to help the pain in that process, a mother might actually say, let's do this again. Let's do this a third time, a fourth time, right? But what you will never hear is someone who has passed a kidney stone saying, maybe God will bless me with another. Well, why? The pain is intense for both, but the outcome is very different. One leads to a baby and the other leads to a stone. Two very different outcomes. And so how we process our suffering is different based on what's on the other side of that pain. As I wrap up here, I just need you to hear this. Life's not a sitcom. Every sitcom has some sort of problem or some sort of tension that needs to be resolved, and it's all resolved and it's all fixed in 30 minutes, including commercials. Right? That's not how life works. You know that. So let me just, I could give you 100 examples. Let me just give you one. If you're going through a difficult marriage and you want it to be fixed, I'm just going to tell you, it's not going to be fixed overnight. But that doesn't mean you should give up hope. Studies have been done that say couples who are at a difficult season in their marriage and both would say, hey, we're very unhappy, and that's how they would rate their marriage. Studies have shown that couples who stay together 5 years later, the 80% of those couples who would have quit over here, 80% of them would now rate their marriage as we're both happy. Not 100%, but 80%. In other words, they had to get through the dip. If your life feels like it's falling apart in any area, doesn't mean you should throw in the towel. That doesn't mean you should give up hope. It's so interesting because we just get caught up in the moment. All of us do. And it's hard to see past it. In fact, the most well-known story of suffering in the Bible is a guy named Job. It It's like this book in the first part of our Bible in the Old Testament. It's the biography of a guy named Job, went through immense amount of suffering. And anytime a pastor like me or somebody who's leading a group talks about Job, we refer to his suffering. What's fascinating is that most people think his suffering lasted 9 months to a year. It was this fraction of his life, this percent. But we talk about it like it was his whole life. Like that's all he had to go through. And when we're in the middle of it, it's hard to see past it. So whatever you're going through, I promise you, I don't know your situation, but there's hope because God is with you and God is for you. And historically, when followers of Jesus start losing hope, what they do to keep themselves hopeful is they focus on the past faithfulness of God. Remembering God's faithfulness in the past will give you hope for the future. So as we're battling the COVID-19 crisis and how it's affecting our church and churches really all across America, and businesses all across America, I just keep reminding myself, man, we made it through 2017. Wow, we made it through those early years when 80 or 90% of new churches don't make it. Like, God, you've given us the strength. You've put the people together. We've done that. God, this is going to continue to move forward. So at Great Lakes Church, we talk about 5 specific values that really drive us as a church. We call them our 5 Gs. One of those Gs is growth. And what we say is, as a church, as individuals, we want to mature, not maintain. In other words, we just don't want to level out. We want to keep moving forward in our faith. We don't want to get stuck or stagnant. We want to grow. And I can't say this enough. One of the ways that we can grow and we can stretch ourselves and we can mature is determining, I'm going to be a person of hope. And you may say, well, it's not my personality, and I'm just not, I'm a really negative person, and I leaned in this bad direction all the time. Hey, listen, when you surrendered your life to Jesus, Jesus says, I go to work, chiseling away at your heart to make you more and more like me. And so let me conclude with these words. Our communities need us to stay hopeful. Our communities, Kenosha, Racine, Northern Illinois, in the different communities, our online audience watch, our communities need for us to be for hope. They need us to stay hopeful. And I'm just going to ask you candidly, what do you think brings more hope? Using your social media to bash a political candidate, or sending a card to someone who needs encouragement? Let me ask you, what do you think brings more hope? Debating all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter, or trying to enlarge our circle of friends so it becomes more diverse? Well, what do you think brings more hope? Talking about things that are wrong with our community and with our school districts, or volunteering in a nonprofit that blesses our community? What do you think brings more hope? Guys, we know the answer. We don't have to complicate it. What brings more hope is doing what we can to just bring joy in the life of another person. So there's a dad in Texas whose 14-year-old son right now has cancer. And because of coronavirus and all the restrictions, he can't be in the room with his son. They only allow one parent, so the mom goes in. Yet he wants to bring hope to his son, and so he brings hope, not by telling him what's wrong with the world, not by telling him all his views politically. He brings hope to him by standing outside his hospital window and entertaining him with dancing. Isn't that great? But here's the deal. That dad is in a situation where he knows his son needs hope. I think we forget how much hope people need, how much joy people need, how much encouragement people need. So we got to constantly remind ourselves. And the only way we're going to be able to do it is if we fill ourselves up with hope. We got to be careful about what we think about. We got to be careful about what we're feeding our mind. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, give us the wisdom to know how to best fill up a hope in our life. Give us wisdom to know what to eliminate in our life and what to be selective about so that we can be people of hope everywhere we go. And then just give us the courage to do it. Give us the courage to speak up. Give us the courage to bring joy. Give us the courage to bring laughter. And give us the courage in every environment we're in to remind people better days are still ahead. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great week, everybody.
Days may be darkest, but how do you light our way? When evil is rising, you're rising higher with power to save, with power to save. You keep hope alive. You keep hope alive from the beginning to end. Your word never fails. You keep hope alive because you are alive. Jesus, you are alive. We're not a stronghold. Your life was stronger. Rose from the grave, rose up from the grave. When evil is rising, you're rising higher with power to save, with power to save. Oh, you keep hope alive. You keep hope alive from the beginning to end. Your word never fails. You keep hope alive because you are alive. Jesus, you are alive. There's hope in the morning, hope in the evening, hope because you're living, hope because you're breathing. There's hope in the breaking, hope in the sorrow, hope for this moment, my hope for tomorrow. There is hope in the morning, there is hope in the evening, there is hope because you're living, there is hope because you're breathing, there is hope in the breaking, there is hope in the sorrow, there is hope for this moment, my hope for tomorrow. You keep hope alive. You keep hope alive from the beginning to end. Your word never fails. You keep hope alive because you are alive. Jesus, you are alive. Oh, you keep hope alive. You keep hope alive from the beginning to end. Your word never fails. You keep hope alive because you are alive. Jesus, you are alive. Hope alive. You keep hope alive from the beginning to end. Your world never fails. You keep hope alive because you are alive. Jesus, you are alive.